Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of the Coreco Couch. And I'm unbelievably excited to introduce my next guest. So I'm very honoured to have Georgie Frost here. I don't know why I'm laughing already, Georgie. I think it's
preparing yourself for the comedy gold that's about to ensue.
No,
that's
not
okay.
sure. I mean, we could be a bit of a comedy double act. Who knows? So, Georgie, for those of you who don't know, where have you been? You really should all know Georgie. So, Georgie's the editor-at-large at Times Money Mentor. She is a multi-award winning broadcaster working for BBC, running podcasts, This Is Money, loads of different podcasts, a media trainer, keynote speaker, event host. You're just basically an all-round superstar, Georgie.
Yeah,
welcome.
I get bored. So I've got to entertain myself. And I don't have kids as well, so that's another reason why I'm able to do those things. But what an introduction. We've peaked.
Was that a good introduction?
Yeah,
Are you happy with the
it was a bit
introduction?
long.
Was it a bit long?
I think when I do podcasts, I like to keep it a little bit shorter.
I'll take notes from you because you know what you're doing, so that's okay.
Just a financial broadcaster. If you know, you know. If you don't, well, it's fine.
So awards?
Yeah, I've won a few.
You've won quite a few, haven't you? You're up for more, I hear.
Yeah, which is it's lovely. Look, awards are lovely, and I don't want to knock it, but they're not the be all and the end all. And I say this, from the position of the lighthouse or whatever it is, where I've won awards and they've been really useful for my career, and I've been nominated for awards and they are absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
But for anyone who misses out or doesn't have them, that is by no means an indication that you are not as great.
No, of course not.
Sometimes it's all about
Yeah.
your performance in that year or that day or, but they are very nice.
Yeah. I've lost just as many as I've won.
Well, absolutely.
So,
Me
exactly.
too. Me too. I'm an award loser. Exactly. But I was doing podcasts in 2007 was my first podcast. I am a veteran.
Wow, was it? Yeah, you are a veteran.
So when you say I'm doing a lot of podcasts now, it does make me smile looking at the podcasting world as to how it's grown, how many of us get, we'll go on to this, I'm sure, in more detail, financial knowledge from podcasts.
Yeah.
Because when I was doing it in my bedroom talking about championship football, at uni, trust me, I would never have dreamt I could make a career out of this. And I'm very grateful that I have.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So how do you actually, on that, how do you find that you cut through when there's so many podcasts now, so much noise? What's the secret ingredient? I mean, obviously I'm lucky enough to have been interviewed by you and your podcast.
So what's the secret then?
Well, I think it's personality, authenticity, knowledge.
I think I'm lucky. So I do This Is Money podcast, the online sort of Daily Mail money section. We've just gone past our decade anniversary. Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about longevity, which obviously you can't just fake up.
That's a massive achievement in the podcast world.
It is. And actually, for a while, we were bumbling along, on reasonable figures. But what really changed it was actually COVID. Right. People really wanted to know about their finances. So a lot of, podcasts, a lot of things that it's just the right sort of time, as to why something may explode. A lot of it is luck. I think just generally, I was listening to a podcast the other day, we really underestimate how much luck plays a part in our lives. Even though we'll go, it's just down to luck. No, it really is. A lot of the time it is. But I think ultimately it's chemistry. And I think where a lot of people get podcasts wrong, and I won't go too far into this because I'm a bit of a geek and I listen to a lot of them, is they view it as it's just a radio show. Yeah. It's not. Radio has a really wonderful place still in our media world. But podcasts, I just think, are just that little bit more intimate. And I've always tried to stay true to that intimacy. Don't get me wrong, there are podcasts that do, unbelievably brilliant work in that kind of hyper-processed, hyper-produced sort of storytelling narrative podcast way. But actually, I think my style has always been just that chemistry, that personality. And the greatest thing that happened to me, and I'll stop here, but it wasn't the greatest. It was very cool though. But I was on a flight to Cyprus on a Wizz Air flight, and I was in the front seat. That's business class on Wizz Air, by the way. And the pilot came out and went, "I'm a massive fan of your podcast."
That's brilliant.
And I thought, Georgie in her pants in her bedroom in 2007 would never dreamt of this moment. But what was amazing is we mentioned it online, and then we had pilots from EasyJet going, we listened too, and then pilots from BA.
That's brilliant.
And I think it's a real community around it. And I've actually had people message me saying, I feel like I've made a friend, which is kind of creepy, but also kind of nice, you know? And I think people do feel like they know you because I think the key to it is every time you do it, and this is where you talk about authenticity, just give a little bit away of yourself.
Yeah.
Now, not all everything, but some people like that style, but, you know, just a little bit of your own self and your own story.
I agree with that. And that's, I mean, the Coreco Couch is, you know, meant to be a bit more intimate than the usual setting. Anyway, Georgie.
Yes.
So your journey to where you are now, how did you get? Because you were sports, weren't you? Initially,
I was.
How did you make that transition, and what was it like being a female in the finance world? Sport,
better than being a female in the sports world. That's
probably.
For sure.
And where did your interest in finance come from?
So, for anyone, you know, listening or watching this, there is a moral to this story. Is I knew nothing about finance, and now I do. Right, so that's good. Right, you can, wherever you are on your finance journey, knowledge, as it were, you can get to a really decent stage. It's just about progression and learning every day. So I started off in the Northeast, cutting my teeth on Roy Keane. I was actually, and I tell this story when I give speeches, I was actually in the Northeast, just arrived, fresher-faced, tighter-faced, anyway, journalist in the Northeast. And I was on my way to interview Roy Keane, and this was in 2007 when I really vaguely remember getting a call from base, probably from my boss. I was a radio presenter, journalist back then, saying, there are queues outside Northern Rock.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This was September 2007.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, can you go and interview people? I remember just thinking, I'm going to interview Roy Keane, you idiot. Like, what could be more important?
Yeah.
That sums up the level of financial knowledge that I had and
really
awareness.
Interesting.
Because every time I talk to Simon Lambert from This Is Money, my podcast, he always says, he remembers the day they went into work and the banks were collapsing.
I remember it. Really
and it was amazing. And me, I was just going, I got to go interview Roy Keane. I had no recollection of that. So I spent a decade in sport. And then unfortunately, while I was in the Northeast, I had quite a major back injury.
Right.
I mean, it was quite serious. And I couldn't work for about a year. And then when I came back, they said, look, after a while I was driving, as you do as a sports journalist, and they said, if you don't stop driving, you will end up in a wheelchair by the time you're 40.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, and I'd moved to the BBC at this stage, and I was in Manchester, Salford, where the BBC Sport is. And I thought, wow, right, let's get sensible. So I was like, I'm going to go down south, I'm going to get a proper job in PR, because that's a proper job, apparently. I was rubbish. I would never have, I couldn't sell anything.
Really?
So I don't know why I would think I would be any good at PR, but, you know, it seemed to me a sensible job to do. And I went down and I spent a month in a chronic pain course input at St Thomas's Hospital. It absolutely changed my life. It took me down to rock bottom. And I remember being sat in a room, and bear with me on this one, and on a whiteboard, the doctor started writing up all the things that we tried, and we would say, you know, this drug and TENS machines and surgery. And she said, why so many? And it just, honestly, I remember it like a movie scene where the camera pans towards you, and I said, because there's no cure. I had lived my life for the last 6 years in chronic pain, blaming myself. If I just spend more money on Pilates, on, you know, chiropractors, on, you know, And I was like, wow, that was my lowest moment, you know, but actually it was the start of something. And from that, I had the confidence to sort of start thinking about taking on a full-time job. And I saw an advert for anybody who knows anything about radio. And I thought, right, I'm down back at home in London. I'm looking for this proper job in PR. I'll just do a bit of freelancing. I was freelancing at BBC London Sport at the time as well. And it turned out it was for a finance radio station called Share Radio. And
I remember Share Radio.
Oh, yeah. You've probably been on, haven't you?
I have been on Share Radio,
And they were like, right, well, we've got you down to do the investment show. And bearing in mind, right, I didn't know anything about this. I was like, oh, right, investing. That's interesting. What's that? In the end, they went, we think we've changed you. You can do personal finance and consumer affairs. All right. But I really wasn't convinced. And then actually, they kept saying, I'll do a show reel. And in the end, I didn't. I just ended up on air. Presumably, there was no one else who was willing to do it. All my friends were like, you're crazy. And I'd have no idea why I said yes, but I did. And I am so glad I did. I remember one of the first interviews was a pensions guy. And I remember going, so, I had 30 minutes to fill. Pensions. How come you got into pensions? What a question. What a profound question. But within 18 months, I got named the Headline Money's Financial Broadcaster of the Year, and I beat the BBC's business editor. And it taught me a really key lesson that sometimes what you think is your greatest weakness could actually be your greatest strength. I, by no stretch of the imagination, was an expert in finance, but I wasn't stupid. And I was learning with my audience. And I made sure that I never spoke above them, and I couldn't. I didn't have superior knowledge to them. I learnt with them, and I think that oftentimes anyone in finance, and this is my pet peeve, is jargon, can forget that audience and where that audience is.
Yeah.
So, it's a bit like a frog in boiling water. You forget how hot it's got until you take a step out. And I think it's really important for all of us journalists, all of us in finance, to take a step out and really get a grasp of how much people really understand or really engaged in finance. So that's been my kind of raison d'etre. But during that back time, I got in serious debt. I was really struggling, really struggling. And so all of that has helped shape the journalist and broadcaster that I am in finance. And I really hope I've maintained that ability to talk to people and reach them where they're at and be hopefully quite engaging. So that is my background. And
that's really interesting. That's a great story.
And the back's still sore, but it's fine. I just manage it. I just think I'm getting old. It's fine.
And now the Times. So do you want to talk about what you're doing there and the whole concept behind the Times money? And
so I'm really lucky. I've managed to have a portfolio career. Which I highly recommend, by the way. And if you've read The 100-Year Life, it does talk about sort of the way that we're living longer and what we're going to have to do in our lives. And I kind of think that I'm sort of there, having lots of different jobs, and it appeals to my personality. And one of those is editor-at-large at Times Money Mentor. I've been doing it for the last 6 years. We've grown the website, and I'm really proud of it.
You should be. It's an excellent, really is an excellent website. Excellent information on there.
I think it's a very difficult time for media journalism generally at the moment, and I think what we've achieved has been really quite great. And from that, we've been able to, which I think is very important with financial media, leverage lots of different platforms. So we've done the Bread and Honey video series, social media. Times Money's managed to do a really great podcast, Feel Better About Money. I think that's the way for financial journalists and financial journalism. How I've certainly seen it change in the just over a decade that I've been in it, is it just does feel a bit more democratizing, and there are lots of outlets. So, like I say, I do the podcast at This Is Money, I do the video series at Times Money Mentor, and I help with the website. Lots of my articles are on there. I often go on Times Radio, BBC, ITV. I talk about, any sort of what's going on in the news. I do a business podcast for Boston Consulting Group. I travel around the world. I've just got back from LA covering Milken, which is described as when Wall Street comes to LA.
Right.
Elon Musk was speaking. Scott Bessent was
there.
Interesting. Oh, yeah. Pitbull was there.
Yeah.
I mean, all the stars. Jessica Alba. I didn't get to interview any of those, but I did get to interview some very famous people, some very good people, and and talk about private equity and all that sort of good stuff. But it really appeals to me, the variety of my role, and I'm proud of every single organization that I work for, because I think what we do is really vital work.
Yeah, 100%. And have you seen people engagement with their finances change over the time? that you've been doing this? Are people more engaged in their finances now? Because it was always the case that, especially if you're British, you never talk about money, really.
We haven't. I think we still have a problem with talking about money in a meaningful way. Have I seen people engage more with their money? I think yes. Would I like to think it's due to financial journalism? Yes, but I don't think it is. I think it's a combination of things. Look, I think one of the really big, I'm going to say the word, game changers is apps, financial apps, fintech. I think has absolutely revolutionized this space. It's basically put things like investing in the palm of everybody's hands. It's made it so much easier. You can save into your pension and your coffee break. These sorts of things and engaging with money, I do think are really vital. And on the flip side, one of the negative things, which has forced people to deal with money, is we keep seeing these crises. And I say that with nervous laughter. It does feel like we've had the financial crisis, which obviously I wasn't particularly aware of, but I was aware of, COVID and the cost of living crisis and all of the stuff that's going on at the moment with, tariffs and global recessions and all of that. And I think people are engaging with money, but I think and I will add also to that, finfluencers, financial influencers on social media. But I was going to say, into that breach of people wanting to know more money, you do get some sort of nefarious characters. You do get a lot of inaccurate stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting, because there's a big discussion in our industry at the moment around finfluencers. I mean, even this morning we were talking about it. And around people who are potentially not qualified or know what they're talking about, who actually have huge followings, whereas the experts who are qualified find it more difficult to cut through. Have you seen that? We're not talking about people like yourself or like Martin Lewis, obviously, who, you're people who have lived and breathed this for years.
Absolutely. But the interesting thing is we are not qualified. I mean, I'm studying for financial advisor exams at the moment, not because I want to be a financial advisor, but because I just thought it would be good for some extra background.
We're recruiting if you're interested.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Thanks. See you afterwards. But no, but we are not qualified either. But that's not, so I have been a bit nervous, and I've seen the growth of big companies, financial institutions working increasingly with finfluencers. I've seen media brands, interestingly, work with finfluencers when you think, well, you've got your own staff that you could probably use. It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, some of the stuff they do is really great.
Yeah.
And again, I go back to when you're so involved in finance, you really do forget, and I don't mean this in a patronizing way at all, because I was there. You forget how disengaged people really are with finances. I wasn't stupid, but I just didn't care. It was either too boring, too complicated. No one was relevant to me. So hang on, all of a sudden, you're getting people who look like you, sound like you, and know a little bit about this stuff. Now, you need to be a bit more discerning, and there's a chicken and egg thing here. We don't have the right financial education in schools.
No.
We know we've got a gap with people's financial literacy. Into that breach, as I said, is coming finfluencers. Some of them are excellent, some of them are not. But unless you have that financial knowledge, you're not going to notice the wheat from the chaff, basically. And so I think there needs to be much greater regulation. But on balance, I think that anything that can get us, not anything, but on balance, the legitimate stuff that can get people engaged in their money, I think is really important. Because you forget where you start, and sometimes it's just the first step. It's just something little, just an article, a TikTok video, and you go, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder what that means. And then you go and see another TikTok video, and then you'll go to Times Money Mentor, and you'll go, oh, I heard about this podcast. This is money. Oh, I'll listen to that as well. And then before you know it, your knowledge has got so much better.
Yeah.
And I just think in terms of breaking down, so democratizing finance and communication and all that, I think actually I want to say on balance has been a good thing. But obviously I'm very wary of it.
I think it's interesting. I think I agree with you. I think on balance it has been a good thing.
It's a nuanced argument.
Because it is. It is. And we argue within our industry all the time about it. But I agree with you in that anything that actually gets people talking about it and gets people involved and gets people to understand and look at their own finances, or to plan more for the future, or to have that conversation with their partner that they never would have, has to be, it's a better starting point than not doing it at all.
Agreed. But then I also think this is a call to arms for professionals.
Yes.
Industry professionals like
Correct.
you, like me. You know, it's no good me going, oh, look at that sort of influencer with 100,000 followers or whatever. Well, why aren't we doing that?
Yeah.
You know, we have the trust. And I think in this world, that is going to be an increasingly important currency. And media organizations and financial institutions need to leverage that currency. And that's where I think we need to be creative and we need to go where people are at. And if they are online, what it tells us, if these followers, these influencers are getting so many followers, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
People want this content.
Yeah.
So why don't we, with the knowledge, the trust, the ability to get some videos out, you know, why don't we fill that gap as well?
Yeah.
You know, so I think that flood the internet with positivity and trusted voices rather than complain about the ones that we're not really sure about.
Yeah, agree. Like that. That's good. That's good. It's brilliant.
I say that
I wish I'd
because I am not very good at social media. And,
Are you not?
And I keep saying to myself,
I bet you got more followers than me. Though.
I've got about 12, and they're not even my mum, right? Because I'm just like, look at me, a picture of my dog. And I always think, I don't know, I'm quite shy, really. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
A little bit.
No, I do believe that, because I am as well. It's quite interesting.
Yeah,
once you get a mic in front of you, I feel like.
But I also think we're of a generation, and I don't mean I don't think you have to be really old. I think basically you see people in the street and they're just there going like that. I just couldn't. No, I'm just there like surreptitious going, yeah, okay, here I am. And then online I'm like, you know. Yes, I mean, I know I need to do it. I don't need to. I would like to do it because I think we have something important to say. And I always think, even if we can help, you know, one person. I thought about that during COVID. We got so many really sort of quite distressing messages of people really, really worried.
Yeah.
I remember getting a couple of messages, you know, a couple of years down the line, just saying, by the way, thank you for that. You were such a sort of sane voice in a crazy world. But, you know,
it's really important.
You really helped. I thought, wow, if that, you know, mic drop, I'm done. You know, I'm out. I've done. I've helped one person. That's brilliant.
I think that's what. Yeah, you must realise that actually that you probably helped loads of people. In just generally, I know sometimes, you know, you do the odd thing or you make the odd comment or I do the odd podcast, and you might get one person to say thank you for that. That does mean the world. And actually, when you've got the exposure you have, you're helping a lot of people. It's
one of the things I say, and this is a Georgie's sage advice for anyone now. No, but if you are someone who's of a disposition where I love my job, don't get me wrong, but I think I am a bit more sort of, I'm not the most natural person to put themselves out there, as it were. So this is all a very weird industry for me to be in, but I absolutely love my work. But what I do to get over that, and I would say this, and I train people in giving speeches, is remember your audience. This isn't about you. You're not important. What's important is what you're trying to say to the person you're trying to reach. And I remind myself of that and say, wow, what a privilege. What a privilege for me to be in this position, to be able to impart whatever knowledge I may have garnered and give it to that person. That's amazing. Yeah. But it's not about me.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of go, it doesn't matter. So if you do make a mistake, that's fine. You know? And actually, if you're giving a speech and you make a little mistake, you're just more human.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of a connection with people. Have a laugh about it.
Totally agree.
You know?
Yeah. And how are you finding it now with financial journalism? Because it seems, again, it's another discussion we have, it seems to be a little bit more clickbaity, a little bit more sensationalist, and you have some institutions, obviously none of the ones you work for, where the headlines are obviously generated by AI. because they don't even make sense.
Oh, you've said AI. We've gone down into a realm that...
Yeah, I don't want to do the next 15 minutes all about AI.
No.
How do you find that? How do you...
Look, I think we're all in a little bit of flux. And I'll say, I won't go too deep into it. We've got really advanced technology coming down the track. I mean, it's here already. ChatGPT is just mind-blowing. All media, all journalism has struggled for a while to work out what's the best model to have a sustainable future. So you will see some sort of clickbaity stuff. Sometimes, we will go too far. Because I think organizations are trying to work out, where do we live in this changing world? And I think we're going to see a little bit more disruption. But it's a bit like a pendulum swinging. And I think you could argue the same with lots of things, technology, social media, for example. I think it swings too far one way, too far the other. We say this with politics. And with any luck, we'll get some equilibrium in the middle. It's just this crazy period. And this moment does feel crazy. But of course I worry, because financial journalism is so important. And I think that, and I can know only from my parents, from my mum particularly, she'll be reading, publications. She'll message me going, what's this? And I think that this is where I think politicians also need to play a role. And I say that because the thing that really struck me was before the budget last year, I do think a lot of sort of financial journalism went a little bit too far in the speculation. And people made life-changing decisions. They took money out of their pensions, etc. And don't get me wrong, they didn't. We, not they. I was part of that. I can't, absolve myself from all of this. We thrive on speculation. When there's a vacuum, we seek to fill it. And there was a vacuum. We had no idea what was coming. But I'm worried with a budget coming up soon, with lots of speculation about what will happen. We know that the government's finances aren't in a great position. But we also know that people are absolutely taxed to the hilt at the moment. There's costs coming out of our ears. The cost of living crisis isn't a crisis, because a crisis would indicate it's one big thing and it will be over. This is ongoing. I don't think we've seen the fallout yet of people who are moving on to higher rates of their mortgage repayments, for example. I still think there's a lot coming down the line for people, and it's getting harder. And so I do worry about journalism, but I think there is so much great quality stuff out there. There really is. And this is the time for that. Again, I go back to trust, to really push yourself to the fore. But so, as I say, it's in flux. We'll see where this lands. I really hope we work it out, because I think journalism is absolutely fundamental to democracy, fundamental for our finances and knowledge and education. And, well, fingers crossed I still have a job as well,
I'm sure you will. So what do you think that sort of the financial, where the main personal finance trends this year, and what are you going to be focusing on and talking about? What are your readers and listeners concerned with this year?
I think the big one I've just said is the budget. What will come down the line? We've already been reading about tax changes, more tax changes. I think people are absolutely fed up with it. I think ISAs are a massive one. ISAs are supremely popular, and the government have got it in their head that if we lower the amount that you can put into a cash ISA, then all of a sudden we're going to use that money, put it into investments, into the UK. Ta-da! It's the silver bullet. That and pensions. We're putting investing our pensions into the UK, and that's the answer. And I don't think it's going to be the answer, but we've got a consultation coming up in the summer, and I think there's going to be a lot of speculation around it. Another area where we will be focusing on is obviously changes to childcare. That will be extended in September. I think there's obviously going to be talk about whether it can be funded by, nurseries. However, I think anything that tries to help parents get back to work. I don't have kids, but I do not understand the argument about, well, it's your fault. You shouldn't have kids. Go back to work. Shut up,
No,
please.
that's
Please.
ridiculous, isn't it?
Those are the kids that are going to pay your pension when you're older.
Exactly.
And we know, and I think this is something that's not this year, but it's definitely something that I'm talking about a lot more. Well, one is AI, but the other one is we're living longer.
Yeah.
We've already seen what's happening in places like Japan and South Korea, and that pattern is happening around the world. I think there's going to be so much emphasis, more than there is now. When we talk about people not saving enough for retirement now, I think there's going to be so much emphasis on, we're living longer, we've got more years in our lives, but have we got more health in those years, as it were, life in those years? And I think that we need to start we need to start saving, because what was once a 15, 20-year retirement could end up being a 40-year retirement. The way that we live, work, save is going to be completely changed. Some of the technology now, exoskeletons to help us stand up in our older age, because we are going to have to continue working. So I think this is something that's going to be on the agenda, not perhaps just for this year, but going for the next sort of decades, is how are we going to fund all of that? How are we going to make sure that we now, while we are young, sprightly things, can make sure that in our older years that we are healthy and vital? And I think that's something that we're really going to talk about as well. So those, I think, are really the big key things. And then I just think it's just the general cost of everything at the moment.
Yeah. And from a property perspective, first-time buyers getting onto the housing ladder.
Look, I come at this from a rather unusual perspective. It's difficult to get on the property ladder. There's no question about it. But you don't have to get on the property ladder.
No.
Right? And I am and was until last year, and I know I'm only 25, but I actually only bought last year.
Right.
Because I didn't want to. I really enjoy renting. It's not dead money. And this is one of the big financial myths, that renting is just throwing away your money. No, it's not. It's afforded me to move around the country for work. It's afforded me to spend months in Spain. If I bought a house, how would I be able to, do an Airbnb around? I've traveled all around the world. If there's something that breaks, I don't have to deal with it. If I have a breakup, I can get out quickly. I think that we have this idea that there's a one-size-fits-all for everyone's life. And it's not. I've lived in some great places that I otherwise wouldn't be able to afford because I have rented. And it's meant I've had a better quality of life. Would it have meant that I could have saved a bit of money? Yeah, probably. But, I just want to say to young people, especially when I hear, how could I afford it if I didn't get into a relationship? And, couples moving in quicker so that they can buy. Why are not every alarm bell ringing in your head saying, I'm only moving in with this person because I can afford to buy a property? Your priorities are way wrong there.
Yeah, I agree.
No, absolutely no way. So yes, it is difficult to get on the property ladder. I am not a big fan of the amount of tinkering that's gone on in property to try and get people on the property ladder. I have a big beef with the lifetime ISA, because I think the fact that the amount that you can spend on a property, 450, hasn't gone up since it was introduced in 2017.
100% agree with that.
I was hit with that because I'm in my older years, I was a first-time buyer.
Yeah.
But because I was older, I moved in with someone who had 2 kids. So we were not looking for a one-bedroom studio flat in London.
But most people aren't now.
No, exactly. Yeah. The average first-time buyer, I think, is what you will know.
34, 36.
Right.
Yeah, and they're going into family homes, a lot of them.
Exactly. And I had to pay a penalty. And I thought that's really annoying because I've done the right thing. I've been saving into this lifetime ISA since 2017, and I had to pay a few grand just because the property. I think, look, if you're going to have that, don't have the penalty. As long as you use it to buy a property. I didn't take it out for any other reason. I bought a property. It just happened to be more expensive. I'm fine with taking the bonus away. Just don't charge me.
No,
that was so annoying.
that seems really unfair. And yeah, it's something we've lobbied for, is the increase in the value as well, because it's crazy. Yeah, it's still so low.
It's ridiculous. I think it's should be about 580,000 now if it had kept up with house price inflation.
Yeah.
I know there are some people, look, I've lived all over the country, and the last place was in Yorkshire, and I know there will be people viewing and watching and listening going, Southerners. And you're right.
I know.
But house prices are really expensive
they
down
are
south.
crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And some people can't, I am someone that's moved around a lot, and I go back to the fact I don't have kids. But if you are from the south, and let's say you have kids, and you want that family network around you because you want to go back to work, it's not that easy just to go up north because house prices are cheaper.
No, that's right.
I mean, I'd love to. If my work would take me back up north, yeah, great. Big fan. But I'm here at the moment, and it's expensive.
Yeah. So, what are Georgie's top tips for managing money? Have you got some?
The first thing, I've already said most of them. The first thing is, it's not about managing. It's about understanding and learning every day. Do something new every day, whether it's listening to a podcast, reading an article, engaging with your finances. I am the queen of burying your head in the sand in the past. Oh God, I used to go to the ATM and have a heart failure every time I tried to get some cash out. Do you remember cash?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used it in ages. I just think a lot of it is back to basics, doing the things that, paying yourself first, paying your future self first. A lot of the things that we personal finance journalists bang on about. The one area that we don't talk about so much, which I think is important when it comes to managing your money, is know thyself. I think if I had one tip, it would be to understand your relationship with money. What does it mean to you? Are you someone that excessively saves, panic saves almost? Why are you doing that? Are you someone that when you're feeling low, goes onto Amazon and just click, I'm not saying that you're going to psychoanalyze, but there are actually tips you can do. If you know you're someone that late at night has a little bit of a shopping thing, and I would always say this anyway, don't let any websites save your bank details. Create friction for yourself. There are hacks that you can do, but I think it's really important to start having a really healthy relationship with money. And a lot of that goes back to what your parents were like when you were younger. So my parents were incredibly time poor. Doctor and a scientist. My dad lived in Norway. Would come home at weekends. They didn't have the most precious thing for me, which was time. So they paid for that time. They would give us gifts. Yeah. They didn't have a lot of money, but what they did, they spent it on giving us gifts. So I've grown up thinking, if I've done something wrong, if I want to say I love you, if I want to anything, I'll buy someone a gift, which is really not that great for your finances, I'll be honest. Actually, sometimes just saying I'm sorry is,
is enough.
Well, I wouldn't say sometimes. It is enough.
It's all they want.
I love you. It is enough. You don't have to give someone presents. And actually, the best gift you can give someone is your time anyway. So I think that's really helped me just really acknowledge where some of my feelings about money, again, this talking about money, I think is another thing. Once you can kind of work that out, one of the biggest reasons that, couples break up is because they have misaligned values about money. One is a spender, one is a saver. And I'm not saying you can't work out if you're like that. But if you have that conversation, if you understand what are your triggers and, you can discuss it with your partner, then it's going to just create a happier, healthier life. And one of the things that is so fundamental to all the work I do, and it was fundamental to Bread and Honey video series, which tried to put money in the context of our lives. It's a money show, but it's really a life show. Yeah. Because there are so many areas of our lives that are affected by money, our health, our happiness, our working relationships. It's all very impacted by money. And if you can have a better relationship, you can have better, you go to sleep better, you can have healthier relationships. So that's what I would say. The one tip is if you can just try and think about it.
That's really profound.
Sorry.
That's a bit of a mic drop moment in itself. I love that. That's brilliant. I really love that. That's good. I'm going to think about that for a minute. And what have been your... I could talk to you for ages, but I know time is...
We've known each other for years.
Time is upon us. Are there any sort of misconceptions out there that really get your goat, that from a finance point of view?
There are absolutely tons, and I've mentioned a load of them. Like this one-size-fits-all approach to money, that everybody's path is the same. I've done things back to front to whatever, started investing before I saved. I was renting for years. I've done it all wrong. But for some reason, it's ended up okay. Yeah. And now I'm not saying you do the things that I do, absolutely not. Yeah. But just realize that, everybody is different. Your values, what matters to you, will impact what your goals are with money. So again, it's that understanding about money. So this one size fits all, renting is a waste of money. I mean, common misconceptions, you need to be rich to invest is always, a stupid one. Yeah, and I think that seems to have done. Saving is good, spending is bad. This is another thing that, and bear with me, right? Saving is good, by the way. Just saying. But spending I hate this idea of, it's almost like, let's get the hair shirts out and self-flagellate when we talk about money. No! Money is freedom. I don't believe money can buy you happiness, but it can certainly buy stuff that is cool. Yeah. And you can have great experiences. Yeah. One of the greatest things for me having money is that I can take my brother to a VIP cricket event match, or I can take my mom to Blenheim Palace and spend the weekend with her. That's the most important thing. I can make people that I love smile with it. I can travel the world. I'm so lucky. I make myself sound really rich. I'm not, but it's because it's working out what I can prioritize. Yeah. I'm paying myself, so I'm saving. I am saving into a pension, but I'm also making sure that I get real value from the money that I have, and that's so important. It's because another thing that really annoys me is when people are just tight, absurdly tight, for the sake of being, I don't know why, and I'm like, just why? Money is there to enjoy it as well. Make sure you get the most out. You work hard for it. Yeah. Enjoy it.
Yeah, it's always about having that balance, isn't it?
Balance.
And that's the whole point of it.
Exactly.
So, what is the best piece of advice you've ever had? And this could be both financial and personal.
Well, look, I mean, there's so much cut across. So there's two phrases that I heard, both from people in finance. One was the brilliant Holly Mackay from Boring Money. And we were talking about pensions, and she said, just get started.
Yeah.
You can grow and develop and learn and as you go on. But the most important thing is just get started. And the other thing came from Tom McPhail, pensions genius, who said, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Ooh, I like that one.
I have used non-stop, because I wrote an article about where my pension was, and I got a lot of stick online from financial advisors. And Tom was like, Georgie's one of the good ones, but don't let perfect be. And I think that is so important. Yeah. Because actually, is there any such thing as perfect? What might be perfect for you might not be, these are financial advisors. And I always say a bit of advice here, if you are going to get a financial advisor, and I do highly recommend, make sure you look online to see actually whether they're quite rude. And this is someone that you can work with, because seriously, I was getting some right abuse there, even though they knew nothing about my financial situation, which is a big red flag for me. The other one, it's not really a piece of advice, but I heard it, and it's a phrase that I think is really important, and I wear it on my wrist, is this too shall pass. And I use this because, not for the bad times necessarily, because, when you're stuck in a hole, it is really useful to know that this will pass. Yeah. But actually, sometimes when you have a bit of good news, I think we Brits can be quite pessimistic. Yeah. Especially, congratulations on winning. Oh, thanks. But actually lean into the good times, because they won't last either. Yeah. So really, really enjoy it. And the worst piece, I'm just going to say this while we wrap up, is trust your gut. I've got a terrible gut. Seriously, I cannot read.
I think I've got a good gut.
Oh, honestly, I cannot read. I just go, that was terrible. I was awful. Because that was the best thing you've ever done. You're going, were you in the same place as me? Yeah. So I would say that. Be wary of your gut, then maybe don't trust your gut. So that's my
And on
Georgie's
that bombshell.
Pearls of wisdom.
There you go.
That you've got a good gut. Yeah. Good to know. Good to know.
Thank you so much, Georgie. That has been fantastic.
You're welcome.
And really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching or listening. Tune in next time to find out who's going to be next on the Coreco Couch.